Those kinds of transactional sales or service kinds of sales, the U.S. Department of Labor statistics says those kinds of jobs are going to be reduced by 1 million jobs over the course between now and 2022.
Hello Sales Nation, I'm Will Barron, host of the Salesman podcast, and welcome to today's show. On today's show we have Tom Searcy, and we're diving into how we can close deals like Warren Buffett. Tom has literally written the book on this subject, which you can find over at salesman.red/193. You can find out more about Tom over at hunterbigSales.com. And with that all said, let's jump straight into today's episode. Hi Tom, and welcome to the Salesman podcast.
Oh, thanks so much. Glad to be here.
You're more than welcome, sir. Today we're going to dive into the topic. I've got a feeling we're going to go down many rabbit holes in this conversation, but we're going to start off with talking about how Warren Buffett does deals, what we can learn from that as millennial B2B salespeople, what knowledge and wisdom we can take on board in the deals that we're doing. But before we dive into specifics, I want to ask you, Tom, is there a right or a wrong way to close a deal if at the end of it, it's closed? Even if what I'm getting at is there a wrong way of going about it, even if the outcome is that the business is won? Is that just all that matters here?
Let's start off with the idea. Let's break it into two parts. Winning, of course, is what you came in to do. So the idea of winning the deal is if you're there and you win under the terms that you were looking to win, that's great. If you're going to, so the second part is, what if you win and you're going to hold on to that deal and you're going to live with that customer for a sustained period of time? All right. The first part is that I sell them that we're going to work together, and it's a one-time, one-transaction deal. Well, that's fine. I'll never see them again. So who cares? I've won the deal, they go away. But most of us, that's not how that works. We're going to have to sustain that relationship for a long time. You can't just win it because under any circumstance. You have to win it in a sustained way because, you married them. And so their mother-in-law is there, your father-in-law is there, the family is there. You have to win it in a way that you're going to see them at holidays from now on.
And can we get more black and white with this, perhaps? Because you said, if it is a one-time deal, yada yada. But I'm sure I can't think off the top of my head, in context of my own experience as well in medical device sales, that there has ever been a one-off deal that I haven't either, forcefully because there's a contract in place, or unforcefully that there's more deals to be done in the future, whether that person is moving from company to company, whether it's, account-based selling and we're going after the bigger account. Can we get black and white with this and perhaps say that every deal that you do, you're getting married?
Well, look, what I focus on are large account deals. And if it's a transactional account, okay, then that's an event, it's a one-time deal, and we hand it off. And I'll tell you, here in the United States, those kinds of people, those kinds of transactional sales or service kinds of sales, those positions, and this is the U.S. Department of Labor statistics, says those kinds of jobs are going to be reduced by 1 million jobs over the course between now and 2022. Okay, what's that mean? 22% of the labor force is going to go away in those particular positions. Why? Well, because all of those roles can be reduced. The only role that will increase in that period of time is those people who can guide to and provide effectively an increasing level of service. That's for the sustained level of jobs. So the answer is if you're in transactional, one-time kinds of relationships, those kinds of deals that are one and done, then your jobs are being displaced. So you have to negotiate, you have to put together a sustainable relationship, otherwise you're going to be displaced.
Should you be worried then if you're listening to this and I'm trying not to name names here, but there's plenty of, and there's a couple of people that come to mind, and you'll probably know who they are. They're very good at training people how to cold call, how to follow up, how to, or beyond the line of hassling the customer to close a deal. Then they close the deal, they get the commission, and they're happy. people who are in those roles, who are taking on training and upping their skills at doing that, should they be worried, and should they be trying to kind of perhaps leave that to one side and get into the positions where it's the bigger, more complex, the longer term sale, where almost harassing the prospect, just it can't work in that scenario?
I love those people. I think they're phenomenal. I think in the next 5 years, they're going to become the kinds of competitors that I will fill my pocketbook with. They don't have the skills as trainers and capable people in the marketplace. The jobs will go down because the people out in the marketplace are going to go away that they're trying to train. And so they're not going to have the kinds of positions. The only people that are going to have the value-added positions are they going to be the kinds of customers, which are the salespeople that need the kind of developing kinds of relationships and skills that they need from companies like ours. And so, yeah, I think this transactional, pound on the prospect business and get more transactions, that's going to go away. Customers don't like it. They're going to get stopped at the door. Things are going to be referred more to the internet, and the tools are put in place to move them out through RFPs, RFQs, all those kinds of other technical processes. The game is stacked against them. And because of that, beating up on salespeople, I could go through that. My second book goes through, or my fourth book goes through the statistics on this. All the research has been done. This isn't Tom just saying so. All of this, the research and statistics on this has already been analyzed. I just put that statistics and that research into one place for people to access it.
Should we be then... okay, I'll ask a follow-up on that, and then we can move deeper into the conversation with Warren Buffett. Are the people who have the DNA, who are super successful and probably making really good money doing these transactional sales now, which is lots of follow-up, lots of... and a classic example is perhaps car sales, that sometimes, not always, depending on the person, depending on how that company does business. I've had dealings with used car salespeople, for example. It's obviously a stereotype, who have hounded me. I've had much better experiences with... when I was getting my company car at the last sales job I had with BMW, and they were, far more they were proactive, but guided me through a process of choosing and added value and all that good stuff. Can the people who have the DNA, who are really good at this, stereotypical, I'm not calling all used car salespeople this because I know they do listen, but the people who are good at that, can they, with their DNA, transfer over to these complex sales? Or does it require just a totally different personality altogether?
It's a great question. Let me ask you just a couple follow-up questions, and then I think I'll be able to answer your question. Well, when you bought that car, did you go online to price check the car before you made the purchase? Yeah. So the price that was on the sticker on the car and the price that you finally paid for, was it the same or was it different?
It was different.
Okay. Did you negotiate, or did you simply say to the salesperson, this is the number that I saw on the internet when I saw that car, and I'd like to buy that car from you because I think that you're a good person, and I think I'd like to buy that car from this lot and from you as a salesperson, but I need you to give me the price of that car, and that way I'll buy from you. Was that, so there wasn't much negotiation. You simply said, I like you, I trust this dealership, but I'd like to buy it for the price that I saw on the internet.
Not as simple as that, but because I've talked about this on the show before when I bought my RX-8, but essentially it was, this is a fair price, you seem like a good guy, and so I trust what you're saying about the car, the small history it had on it, and so this is where I'm at, otherwise I'm walking. That was the conversation.
Okay, in that circumstance, he or she had developed a relationship with you. There was a margin of difference that relationship had that was of value to you. And that was 10 years ago, a more significant amount of margin. That margin is lower now because the internet has squeezed that margin down. All right. So now what that sales representative is doing is really fighting for a very fractional amount of margin, because it's in developing a relationship with you and with the secondary components. Maybe that's repairs, maybe it's some other kind of thing. My point is this, Every place in the internet in which there's some touch point, there's going to be a reduction in what traditional sales skills would be used of pestering you at home by following up and saying, I want you to buy that car, what would it take to put you in that car, all those other kinds of things. Those kinds of things, those kinds of sales skills are no longer going to be valuable in selling that car as at the same margin as what this particular process has done. This gives some opportunity for the sales rep to maybe hone his or her sales skills to go to that next transition. However, anyone who can't make that kind of relationship, the person to talk to you, they're dead.
Nice. And just to stay on this for a split second more, is this, I don't know the answer to this, honestly I don't, and it might be a chicken and egg situation with the internet and just people in general, but is it a fact, and there might be research and data on this, that more touch points online lead to less time needed with a salesperson, all these things, or is that become less effective because people just won't put up with a salesperson hassling them like perhaps they would have done 20 years ago? And I don't know the reasons behind that. That's probably a conversation in itself. But I know that, for example, my dad is more polite when people hassle him. He bought a new car, or we're looking at a new car recently. So he was more polite about a salesperson chasing him versus if they tried to chase me. Obviously, I'm a unique situation hosting the Salesman podcast. I'd probably tell them how it's done, or I'd give my opinions and thoughts on it and have a conversation. But I am so no tolerance whatsoever for if I say no for any follow-up, to the point of I will just be rude, block them, block the number, block emails in an instant. Whereas perhaps 20 years ago, that wouldn't have happened. So is it that people are becoming less tolerant to the follow-up without the value being added, or is it that it's just not needed because of the internet?
Intricate question. Let me separate this out between business to business selling and business to consumer selling. Business to consumer selling, much easier to kind of tighten up all the points of access to a consumer. The internet has so many points of access and points of comparison. You see people in stores truly comparing right down to the SKU, right down to the specific number of an item, and looking at it and then going home and ordering over the internet because they saw it in a store. Who is being rude at that particular point, right? So in the business to consumer world, it's a little bit different. In the business to business world, those issues of being rude are very, very different. So let's separate this out. What you've just described is a business to consumer world, and it is going to change dramatically, generationally, from your father to you. And the business to business world, that has this whole issue of complexity, of which will still hold on to a lot more discussion, more people, whether you call them engineers, or other kinds of things.
Nice. Okay, so let's move on to this idea and this concept of, for want of a better phrase, the Warren Buffett close or the Warren Buffett negotiation. How does, because I'll ask this first, for B2B salespeople, should they be modeling Warren Buffett when they're doing deals? I guess that's the place to start.
Let's start off with Warren Buffett. Warren, it's very hard for anybody on this conversation right here to say envision themselves as Warren Buffett. I mean, even when I wrote the book with my friend Henry DeVries, we're looking at this and say, well, I know how to do a deal with Warren Buffett. Let's start off with $10 billion. That's this has got to the first conversation has to be rather easy. Throw the money out of the conversation. Warren Buffett did a lot of deals in which he was not the person with the most money in the deal. Here's the things you take away that I've taken away. Warren Buffett does more research on the deals he's trying to do than anybody else. So he has more information on all of the buyers, on all of the market, on all of the driving issues. Second thing, he always starts off with how is the CFO going to look at this deal? Now, in my own background, and what we teach all of our customers, our customers, as they look at their prospects and their customers, is to look at how the CFO will look at this deal. Now, people say, well, I'm not selling to the CFO. Well, let me tell you, the CFO's lobby is the least busy of the lobbies. Inside of any of on business to business environments, it's the least busy lobby. If you go into the other lobbies that you're going to go into, you're going to see a whole bunch of other people that look just like you, knocking on the doors, trying to get an appointment for 15 minutes to an hour to present your deck, your PowerPoint, telling everybody why you're better than they are. You go to the CFO and you show them why you're unique or better, you'll have a much better presentation, a much better opportunity. Because here's the thing, you're going to see the CFO at some point in the presentation on a business-to-business deal. It's better if you start with them first instead of last. Warren Buffett starts with, how is the CFO going to look at this deal? What is going to be the perspective of this particular deal? And then the next thing that he's going to look at is
Let's just stop there a second. I think this is worth going over because I found this selling to the NHS. I had to rewrite and position everything versus when I was selling to surgeons, when I was selling to director level, when I was selling to CFO and the accountant side of things. There was one side of things, then they had to be pitched in a totally different manner. I don't want to just gloss over that point because I think this is important for everyone listening. How, practically, you can use an example, you can make up a product or however you want to go about it, but practically, how do you change the pitch and make it applicable for a CFO versus almost everyone else?
Let's use healthcare, all right, because you brought up, I think, a healthcare environment. And we have several clients that are in healthcare. If you go talk to a CFO and you say, all right, we're going to talk about the number of hours that you're going to have a patient in your facility and the number of hours that are paid for by your insurance companies that are that are going to come through here and how that care is facilitated, because every hour beyond the amount that is paid for by insurance, you're going to carry that amount of hours. Our system, our medical system, whether it's a pharmaceutical or it's a bed care or whatever it is, reduces those number of hours because of the following reasons by an hour and a half. And that works out to this many dollars. And that many dollars then comes back to your company in free money that you're not having to pay. We can prove that clinically. We can prove that technology-wise. We can prove that against your numbers. And by doing that, you'll receive X amount in your system every year. CFO says, that sounds very interesting. I'm excited about that. I want you to prove that to me through my clinicians, my clinical specialists, and through my IT specialists and my operational specialists. You've now shown me the money. Now go prove to me that it works. That's an example of going to the person with the money. Now, if you'd gone to the clinicians and said, I want to go ahead and talk about this, the clinicians are going to say, we have a system that works just fine. Right now we've got other priorities and I want to get on this, but honestly, we can't do this until next year because we just don't have the time or the resources to do this. And you go around the horn because those people are not interested in the number of hours. They're interested in other initiatives. This is the reason that you hop over. And I can tell by your smile, you know exactly what I think that I'm talking about.
I'm smiling because you just described how we used to do things, and I'm glad that you didn't describe it totally the other way around. So essentially, we'd probably start with the surgeons first. That's where the best relationships were. You'd bring in the new endoscopic camera system. It would be a new flashy toy. Of course, all the surgeons want to play with it. So they're on board, no doubt about that. I've only ever worked for the kind of top companies in the industry, so they always wanted to have the latest and greatest. That wasn't selling, that was just doing a demo. You could do that with little skill. The skill would always be then to get the financial side of things on board, and the NHS works slightly different how you just described of you do a number of procedures and then you claim that number of procedures back from the government. So if you're underutilizing the space, if you've still got staff in there, if you can fit in one more procedure at the end of the day, it adds up to hundreds of thousands across multiple theatres at the end of the year, which clearly then the NHS never has any money, so that 100,000 just gets sunk into something else. But it allows them to make progress. So I'm just glad I'm glad the way you described it was similar. How we would go in and then say, well, look, by investing this, you get X, Y, and Z off the back of it. Here's the data from other trusts, other hospitals that we've done this in. So yeah, and I interrupted you then, but I'm glad we went over that. You were going through some of the steps of the process that Warren Buffett goes into in particular.
Yeah, Warren. So we start off with the idea of research, and then secondly, he looks for what are the non-dollar benefits. He works very hard to not get into an auction. Because in an auction, if it's $1 only, then it's just simply going to be a purchase price. He's looking for those things that are not going to be dollar only. So he says no to, he estimates, I think he just says this for the saying of a number, 99% of the deals he says no to because they look like auctions. Mm-hmm. He looks for those kinds of things that are different than that. For example, the consolidation of an industry or speed to the deal, or families who are trying to consolidate their businesses because there's differences between the families or whatever. And because of that, there is a willingness to sell at a price that is less than market rate. Because people say, okay, I could get an extra $1 billion, but it'd take me 1.5 years to get it. If I work with Warren, I don't get that billion, but I get the deal done now. I take the whole 50 cousins out of the current stock ownership. I'm dying as a family leader, and I want before I pass. And this is the kind of research that he does, and all of those things happen. So he looks for everything that's not about the money. As everyone says, well, he bought that for so many dollars. He buys these things for less dollars than what an auction would be. Most of the people that are in sales ask themselves a question: what would it take to get this deal done? And Warren says, instead, when I look at this, what is my money worth? To the buyer, what is my money worth? And so it's almost a different kind of a discussion with those people. And if they don't have a willingness to do that inside of his criteria, he moves on.
So this ties back very nicely to something that I scribbled down and I wanted to come back to. I think the words you used were Warren doesn't always have the most money in the deal. So clearly he's doing his research, he's finding leverage points that he can add value on. I'm sure some of these things will be like his connections, his network, and things that he probably can take over a company and bring people in and make the company more profitable, and can organize things at a higher level than just an outright cash purchase. But for the B2B salesperson listening, what leverage points do they have perhaps that they can bring to a conversation if because of course price is on the cards in most conversations if perhaps you haven't done this initial step, but what can they personally bring to the conversation to make it less about price and make it more about wanting to do a deal with them specifically?
I always break it down to 3 categories. It's instead of being I always look at it as time, money, and risk. All right, and instead of being quality, service, and price. All right, so time, money, and risk, which are different than quality, service, and price. There's not enough time for us to go through all of it, but you have to shift the angle of discussion. Let me give one example. The issue of risk. So the very, very large manufacturer of heavy equipment comes in and says, look, we've got a new platform for manufacturing this very large equipment. And it takes 4 years to get on the platform for the components and the pieces that are in there. And you haven't even been approved to be on this platform. So you're never going to get a chance to be a part of the components of that. And so we worked with the company that we were in. They said, we can't even break in. I said, I'll tell you what, let's come up with a way to mitigate their risk. and to accelerate their time. So let's throw a 2-day engineering innovation summit, our expense. And so we bring their engineers and our engineers, and we just simply say, we throw this innovation summit together. The engineers come together, we provide the food, we ask 4 innovation questions, we bring that all together, and we bring a couple noted innovation people together, and we try to come up with the answers for the future. It's all innovation, we're not going to try and sell anything, and etc. Well, you can see that it's an accelerated conversation about time, and it's a diminishing issue of risk. Well, within that period of time, their engineers and the engineers have linked together, answered 2 sets of both those areas around time and risk, and the engineers have said, we're going to take all of this work for the next sections, we're going to move it over to this company because we trust the engineers, and in addition, we've got these other platforms where we don't like the way that the people that are currently providing it, and we're going to move all the work over here. And the supply chain management people say, well, you can't do that. And the engineers go, I'm not sure if you're aware, we're the engineers, and we can do that. So they moved an enormous amount of business by focusing not on price, not on service, but on what? Time and risk. So it's those kinds of things where you have to come in through a different doorway and solve a different problem if you're going to move people over.
And is this where the skill of all this is? Is this where the hustle, the quote unquote hustle of cold calling, of hammering people, of following up, of working long hours, kind of gets negated a little bit by the EQ that you have, the empathy that you can have to see other people's perspectives, and these are of course natural traits, things that perhaps we can work on as well. But that's going back to the beginning of the conversation. That's the split between perhaps the used car salesperson versus the person who are putting these 2 deals together. Is that the skill? Is that the crux? And is that what we should be working on to develop with all of this?
That's absolutely one of the key issues, and there are probably less than 10 of them. They all go against the core belief sets of the normal sales training ideas that are out there. And here's the reason why. It's an issue of scale. When you go for deals that are 10 times the size of an average size deal, you cannot think like the normal size transactional approach salesperson. You can't. It's not. They're in completely different ballparks. And so if you're trained to do X number of calls and X number of follow-ups and X number of presentations, and it's all written on a script, and frequently asked questions and rebuttals that are all put in place, you're a president, CEO, chief financial officer, they're not going to respond to that. You're not going to get access to those kinds of people. They don't talk product, quality, service, or price. They have a different language. One of the things I would say to the millennials that are out there, they have an enormous amount of opportunity. When I was 28, I had a chance to lead a team of 11 people to land a $400 million deal. And there was 11, because you can't go close a deal like that with one person. You have to have the subject matter experts, the IT and the engineering and the finance and et cetera. People say, oh, that was amazing, da-da-da-da-da. Well, it was. And one of the reasons why we landed it truly was we didn't know you couldn't. I mean, we're too stupid to understand that doesn't happen. We brought it in, and everyone's looking at us like, well, don't you know that doesn't work? Like, well, do we take the contract back? It was kind of one of those things. But the point being is that the people we were competing against did not have creativity or perspective. They were selling in an old, tried and true model. And when you look at the millennials and their willingness to go outside of that box and to try new perspectives, they really have the opportunity to beat or to defeat if they're willing to go outside of this tried and true methodology that we've all been trained on and beaten on. Sorry, I've got my soapbox and I'm standing on it and I'm kind of preaching right now, but I see so many talented people that have just been hammered on with this stuff, and it's just unfair. It's just sad.
Well, look, the last company I worked at, it took me 6 months or so and battles with my sales manager, who was a good guy, and he put it together. But I got everyone around the table, the important people within the company, on the UK side of things. And I said, hey, look, we've got a real opportunity here. No one else is doing it, to get in front of surgeons by creating some kind of online content, by just interacting with them on social media, things that an individual salesperson can do themselves with the surgeons that they're dealing with every day. So not social selling of prospecting over social media, which is debatable in my mind of the use of that. But the people that you're constantly communicating with, it was an opportunity to deepen relationships. And it went down a storm in the meeting, and then a week later, nothing happened. A month later, we had a new LinkedIn page that no one ever visited. And that was the extent of it. And that was me being naive, thinking that I could convince. Age doesn't really have a place in this, perhaps, but it was these people who, as you described, they were older, but they were entrenched and ingrained in the way of doing things. And they will, I've not spoken to them in years now, they will have reacted to the shift in the market and the opportunities in the market, I'm sure. But they were far slower to react than me, being this naive 25-year-old wanting to take over the world of the attention of every surgeon in the UK. And yeah, they missed out because of that. I could have, if they would have took me on board, if they would have listened to me, I perhaps could be hosting a podcast for urologists that reaches essentially every urologist in the UK. They all drive to work. That could have been an amazing marketing tool for them. And instead of doing this, I'm happy doing this. But as a reference point to your rant, then, for want of a better phrase, I'm super passionate about it, and I believe in everything that you're saying there.
Yeah, I think it's there. I mean, one of the things I would say to everyone is the limitation that we have of going big. Most of us believe that we have to go incrementally big. So if I sell something for $1,000 or whatever the number is, that if I sell something for $2,000, I've made an incredible sale. Instead of saying, I want to sell something for $25,000 or $250,000. That idea that you can, but you have to build a strategy or something remarkable, it can be done. And this is not a positive thinking. Yay, get up there in the morning, put the Post-it note on your mirror, and you can go do it. Although I think those things are good, I just think that there is this perspective that there's a limitation. So I don't think.
Last thing, Tom, on this, because I don't want to gloss over this. I think this is important, and this is something I've taken away from reading about Warren Buffett specifically. And I think it's going to relate to the way sales is going, perhaps in the future, more so as well as now in 2016. How important is the individual's reputation in the marketplace? I guess at the moment now, you can become, because no one's really doing it, a mini kind of expert in the industry pretty easily in most industries, in most sectors. I did it in what I was doing in medical device sales. Most of the urologists in the country knew me. And my reputation then was that I worked hard and I always sorted them out and helped them out when they needed. And that's what they knew me from. So is reputation something that is, obviously it's important and you don't want to be known as a shark, but is it as important as what I think it is? And is it going to get more important in the future? Absolutely.
It's critical. Over 80% of buyers look you up on social media before they meet you. They will look you up. All they'll simply do is a Google search, and then they'll look at your LinkedIn profile. They'll look you up on Facebook, which I think is interesting. Interesting is a code word for ridiculous, but They'll look you up. They'll look you up on your Twitter account. They'll look you up on whatever other social media is that out there. So they'll look you up on that. If you've published in some way an article or some other document, and they will look that up. It takes less than 5 minutes. You'll credentialize yourself in that way. Because there's so much back and forth and movement around in industries, it's not so much looking at your CV to find out. And they don't take the time to go find out through calling their friends or other kinds of things. They look at a digital profile of you. It's much faster. And if you've got very little out there credentializing you, then they're very skeptical. You're responsible for your brand. You are 100% responsible for your brand, and you need to invest in it aggressively.
I'm super glad you said that. It's been on my mind for a few months now to put some kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't call it a course, but some kind of maybe a mega blog post with, video and other bits in it as well, because I think this is a big leverage point for the people who are doing complex B2B sales, because we Google everyone that we deal with to build up research on them. So of course, I think you used the number was 80%. Of course, they're going to be Googling us as well. It's a no-brainer. But then I'll do this. Anyone who, when this gets mentioned on shows, when it gets talked about on Twitter and that kind of thing, anyone who disagrees with it, I will Google them, and it's very clear that they're not taking part of it because there's just nothing to their name other than the Twitter handle, perhaps, because they do well on search engines. And so, yeah, I'm gonna grab you back in the not too distant future, Tom, and probably do maybe a Q&A, or we'll do something together, and we'll put this into a big blog post, because I think this is something that really I feel passionate about, and I feel like I can really drill down and drive the importance of this with our audience specifically.
My pleasure.
Good man, good man. Okay, Tom, I've got a couple of questions to ask everyone that comes on the show. First one, if possible, and I think you might have already given it us perhaps, but what is the biggest in dollars deal that you've ever closed?
$2 billion. It's one deal worth $2 billion. It's $2 billion in US money.
Nice. I'm not even going to dive into that, but congratulations. That's the biggest deal that's been closed on the show so far.
Probably it was not just me. I led the team that closed that for my client, and I was running that on in a contract basis for my client. There was a team of about 36 people, so that we closed that. But that was the deal. That deal actually was inside of the last 24 months.
Nice.
So.
Congratulations on that. That's huge. As I said, biggest number that's come up on the show, so I appreciate that. It gives context to the audience, and it allows us to think a bit bigger than perhaps the millions that we've talked about so far. Okay, next one. Other than your own, which we'll come on to, what's one book or resource that you'd recommend to the Salesman Podcast audience?
I really like the Challenger Sale. I think that it's very, very relevant to what's coming out in the future. Dixon and Adamson wrote that book, and then it came out about, I think, maybe even as long ago as 3 years. But it really speaks to the future of what's going on with sales.
Definitely. Cool. We'll link to that in the show notes over at salesman.red. Next one. Who is the world's greatest salesperson?
This is going to come out as an odd one. Henry Kissinger. So Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State, back underneath Nixon and then under Ford, I would say was probably, historically in my mind, during my history, is probably the greatest salesperson that I can think of. Nice.
I'm pretty sure we could dive into that a whole lot further. It seems that there's a whole show in there itself, so I'm conscious of time, so we'll keep rattling through, but that's an interesting one. It's not a person that's been mentioned before.
I would imagine not.
Well, usually it's Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs.
Gates hasn't sold anything. Steve Jobs is a marketer. Come on. Barack Obama. Okay, we can't go there.
No, that's not. Okay, next one. What does the first 60 minutes of your day look like, Tom?
60 minutes of my day. I would say it's spent physically in some physical activity, spiritually in scripture and prayer, and meditation. So those are the most important things for me in the first 60 minutes of the day.
Nice. And final one, something I ask everyone that comes on the show, if you could go back in time, speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at sales?
I would start with, I got two pieces actually. One is that don't sell bad deals. Just get rid of as many deals as you can fast as possible. And secondly, always start with the CFO. Start with the money and work your way backwards. And if you can't start with the money and explain how that works, don't work the deal.
What does don't sell bad deals mean? Explain that one a little bit further.
If you start off with a filter that says, here's what deals that will wind up you're going to lose looks like, and I build that filter right now, and I know what, we have 11 questions right now for my business, and if you answer these questions in a way that indicates that you're going to be, you're not going to be somebody we can help, right? Those 11 questions are very refined, and if we can't help you, it's not that you're a bad company, it's just we can't help you. You're the wrong kind of customer, then we wind up passing you on to someone else. So that's going to be a bad deal. When I say a bad deal, I mean it's a bad deal for you. You'll waste money, and it's a bad deal for us because we'll not be able to meet our promise.
Nice. And is there any leeway to these questions, or are you very rigid and firm of how you go about asking them and collecting that data and make a decision?
Typically, if there's a place for leeway, it's a point of conversation. We talk about why we asked that question and why it's a place of why it, the reason why it didn't work. And then we have to ask more questions to say, is there a position in there where there's leeway? And sometimes there is. Sometimes there's a good reason why there's some, an example of why, well, this isn't exactly the way that we said it, or maybe we could do this much, or we should slow down the process and we can move this far and then reevaluate. But it does create a better conversation.
Nice. I was just interested then because, again, I think the simple answer if you were selling a commodity would be, well, no, these are what we do, X, Y, Z. Whereas clearly you're selling a complex service and complex system and teams that go together with it. So I guess the sale, the prospecting, everything else has to be complex enough to align with it, so you can really add value to the individual. You've got to, I guess, dig a bit deeper than perhaps what, and I hate to be bashing on them, but perhaps what the used car salesman has to do.
That's right.
Good man. Tom, we've mentioned a couple of your books. I know you've got a bunch of them. Tell us about a couple that are relevant to our conversation so the audience who have learned a whole bunch today can go out and perhaps do a little bit more research and learning on these topics. And then tell us a little bit about huntbigsales.com as well.
So my most recent book is called Life After the Death of Selling. How to survive in the new era, or actually how to thrive in the new era of sales. And that book is all about that 10% that's going to grow and how to be a part of that 10% that's going to grow. And then, of course, how to close a deal like Warren Buffett. We talked about that. There's an enormous amount of free information, ridiculous amount of free information from all the articles that are from Wall Street Journal and Forbes and Inc. magazine and our own materials we put out there at huntbigsales.com. And it's just all on our website. It's all free, and we just give it. If you go online, you'll be able to pick it up and enjoy it. So
good stuff. We will link to all of that in the show notes over at salesman.red. And with that, Tom, you've got some, without stroking your ego too much, some really intelligent and differing views to what other people that come on the show have on some of this. I agree with 99% of what you said. I can't think of anything that I don't agree with, so I appreciate that. I appreciate your time, your insights, and I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Thanks, Will. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
And there we have it. Tom, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate your time. Thank you, as always, Sales Nation, for tuning in. It means a lot. And of course, I love doing this, and I couldn't do it if you guys didn't both listen to the episodes and hopefully take something from them, and then share them with your friends and colleagues in the sales industry as well. So I appreciate that. And so, I will speak to you all again tomorrow.